All right, everyone. Welcome to Actual Mormons. We're doing something a little different here. It's just me instead of Bridger. Um, I've invited Daniel Flinders onto the channel. This is relevant to the whole Fairview fiasco. Many of you may have saw me on Mormonism with the Murph, where we discussed the whole height of the steeple, whether there should be a steeple. And Daniel, he actually tried to get onto the channel, and Murph wasn't able to get him on. And we won't hold it against him. We don't know why Murph didn't bring him on, but we'll just assume the best about Murph and say that he just was short on time and he didn't want to invite too many people on. But Daniel, why don't you just introduce yourself, explain to everyone why they should listen to you and why you have some relevant expertise to this issue.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Daniel. I live in McKinney, which is right next to Fairview. I'm about 15 minutes away from where the temple site is going to be built. So um, I've I've spent a lot of time and energy trying to understand the situation. Um, I don't have all the time in the world, as I'm a father of currently three kids, some 5-year-old twin daughters, and then a son, and I have one on the way coming here next month. So time is tight, between that and working. I just don't have the time in the world to spend investigating it a ton, but I found that through the couple different discussions I've heard and reviewing a lot of the documents from the Fairview United website, I just thought I should add my commentary just to add some more context about the whole situation. So that's why I wanted to talk on here and reached out to Jacob. He was kind enough to let me on, as I don't have any following. So figured I'd go to somebody who has some reach for some of this information.
Yeah, he reached out to the guy who has 400 followers on YouTube. But
That's
yeah,
400 more than me. So
yeah. So hopefully this will help me get a few more followers.
yeah, right. Win-win there.
Yeah, you actually have done a bit of digging into the meeting minutes for the Methodist bell tower as well. I know that
Yep.
Mormonish has covered that, but
Yep.
you talked to me and their covering of it was a bit skewed, and we don't want to get into a back and forth with them. We don't want to argue with them, but just
Yeah, I just don't have that kind of time,
yeah,
being so, but I do feel like there's some relevant information that should be reviewed. And
yeah.
and as well as to Fairview United, the citizens of Fairview, I reviewed their documents and they cover it as well. And I felt like they were missing some details that are important for the discussion.
Okay, sweet. Well, feel free to let us know what you learned.
Okay, I'll share my screen now. Wait, sharing is not turned on.
Uh, Recording.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen now. All right. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to cover is help people that aren't from the area understand a little bit more about Fairview and what it's like. The reason why I think that's important is you read articles and just some of the discussion around it. It's, big corporation against small farm town. And I just want to say I've, been to Fairview many times. Once I didn't even realize I was there when I was a newer resident in the area. And I just drove through it and I was like, this place is gorgeous. I would love to live here. It reminds me a lot of where my parents now live, just more spread out homes. Everybody has 1 or 2 acre lots. So it feels a little bit more private, but it's extremely close to everything. So you can see here, this north part is Fairview. You can see the houses here. I mean, just fantastic houses. They're gorgeous, 1 2 acre lots. It's a very expensive place to live. I would have to make a lot more money. I mean, just to show you, if you go to Zillow, the houses, most of them are over $1 million. Just beautiful homes on big property. So um, I think it's giving that they try and keep that country feel as far as it being a small farm town. I don't think that's quite as accurate. I just think it's a gorgeous place. It's also extremely close to everything right up here. This is a part of Fairview. And this is their massive shopping center that they have. You've got Macy's, Old Navy, Dillard's. And then just on the other side of the freeway is a different town, but this is a big shopping center as well. This is the Allen Outlets, all just in this hub. We've come here all the time to go shopping. Allen Outlets was actually in the news not that long ago because of a shooting that happened there. It was really sad and tragic. And then this is also a part of Allen. You have a Top Golf right down here a little ways. I can't see it here, but it's lit down a little bit ways. And just, the big, this courtyard, I don't even know how many stories it is, probably like 10 or 12-story hotel. And then this Stacy Road, this is the same road that they want to build the church on. Or not the church, the temple on. So you just come down this road about, let's see, around here is when the commercial district ends for Fairview, and just down this road a little bit, this is where the temple site's going to be. And you can see there's a few homes around it. This is a church. This is a LDS Stake Center. Here's some homes. And then this is a different city. This is Allen. So Allen is a big suburb, and then McKinney is a big suburb, and Fairview is just kind of sandwiched in between. You might say it's just like the country club, going on over here, these nice big houses and everything. And this is actually parsed into two lots. There's a temple wants to build here, and then here there's going to be another church. So church want to build our temple, and then a church. And then you come down this road, and a lot of people have talked about the United Methodist Church. That's right over here in this corner. So the Fairview kind of meanders this way. And then you'll see here Lovejoy Elementary School. This is one of the best school districts in we call the DFW area, Dallas-Fort Worth area. One of the top ones, like top 3, I would say. Or at least top 5, and then one of the best in Texas. So these people are, if you're living here, you're probably doing really well. Not very many apartments, just this apartment complex right here, and maybe some more over here. But it gets a little, I think that might be the only apartment complex. Don't quote me on that one, but that gives you a little bit more context. Do you have any questions on that?
Well, funny thing about zoning laws, zoning laws are meant to keep apartment complexes from being built, and so they inadvertently keep people of a certain income bracket from moving into the neighborhood. That's one of the criticism of zoning laws. Not directly relevant to what we're talking about, but that is one thing you could bring up when it comes to the negative effects of zoning laws. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, and with how crazy house prices are, like that's very relevant in trying to help tackle some of these issues with house prices. I mean, it is a lot of these rules that the cities or the states impose on people being able to build housing, more affordable housing, can really mess things up.
So it'd be really easy to paint this as a bunch of rich people not only trying to protect themselves from having a big building obscure their dark skies, but also protect them from having apartment complexes from being built into their neighborhood with people of a certain income bracket moving into their neighborhood as well. You didn't say that, I did. So
I didn't say that. I'm not gonna
yeah.
throw them under the bus like that.
Yeah,
but
I can be the mean guy.
Yeah, you're out of here, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so anyways, great area. Would love to live there. Unfortunately, I gotta make like probably triple what I make now before I can afford a house, for a family of 4. I could probably stay in these apartments, but that's about it. But yeah, just a great area. But that's just a little bit more information about this small farm town. And one thing that we had discussed, because we talked before, is like we've both lived in farm towns. I spent 4 years in a I guess a small town, about 2,500, working in a manufacturing plant because I'm an engineer. And, several of my coworkers own farms on the side, 50 acres. I remember one of my coworkers was saying he had 12 acres, like, oh, you got a lot of land. And he's like, that's not a lot of land. My brother has 50 acres, and nearest Walmart's an hour away. And you grew up in a small town, right?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town of 1,700. in Arizona. My dad grew up in the same town. His dad grew up in the same town. I didn't grow up like on a farm, but my dad did.
Yeah.
I grew up going to the farm my dad grew up on. So yeah, it's a farming town. Um, Fairview does not fit the description of a farming town.
Yeah. And I think some of these areas out here, there's might be a few more farms going on. But yeah, this whole area, that's just, nice houses on 1 or 2 acre lots for the most part. So that adds a little context. I did on Google Maps as well, just to show a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, just tons of shopping here. This is McKinney's right up here, kind of this area up here, and then you get down to Fairview, and then the bottom of Fairview. I mean, it's right on the border between the two. If you look at this map, this shows you where Fairview is. This is where the temple's going to be. It's right on the edge, and it's also the temple is right across the street from a Sonic and a Pizza Hut and a CVS and some other stores. Just this is all just buildings. So there's actually no house facing the temple. There's some backyards. So these people's backyards, which is I would argue is the closest, and then these people. But they'll have a church building soon enough. They've purchased a lot. They haven't built it yet. I'm sure they'll go through their approval process. They're going to have a church here. And so this temple isn't going to be that close to these houses. I think I measured it. It's about 1,000 feet. So these ones are the ones that are most affected by it. Because there's also 2 churches in between these homes. And then you just get over here. I know there was I heard somewhere about like people's sunsets being ruined by this. Well, this is east to west here, right? And there's some variants that will go north and south, but I'm not sure whose sunsets are going to be messed up. Uh, the only one would be these properties, but it's 1,000 feet away, so the temple's going to be relatively small, and there's going to be a church building. So maybe these homes were the ones I was talking about. These ones that won't, where the sun sets over here to the west.
Yeah,
Uh,
the ones living on Forest Oaks Drive are living north, so they're not gonna be affected like as far as sunsets go.
yeah. And then we'll go over their document and their concerns next. And so we can kind of go over that. But I want to at least show people the area. This narrative of small farm town, I just don't agree with that. I think it's a beautiful, nice area, and I understand what they're trying to preserve. But let's not say let's call what it is on that part. So I'm going to open up here the temple study. And what this is this is the fair. You can find this on Fairview United's website. Encourage everybody who wants to learn more about about what's going on here. Go to this website and you can read the document. Nothing. Yeah, I read through it and I was able to learn a few things that help me figure out a few things. But yeah, this shows you where that lot is, the church and these houses. There's that Forest Oak. There's your Sonic and your CVS. Just about a mile, literally a mile, there's a swig. So I don't know. Maybe that's why they wanted this for all those Mormons out there drinking swig. Um, but yeah, that's what the temple's going to look like. And this is their response to the city to basically express their concerns about the temple construction. And I'm going to go over it briefly, just page by page. We're not going to really stop to read it unless there's something really important, but just so that way we can make sure everything's addressed. So in here, they show an illustration of what the temple is on measurement height. As you can see, top of the steeple is going to be 173. And then the top of the roof, they call it this top of steeple, which it really should be the roof. And that's something that they pointed out, that this isn't really a bottom of the steeple. That just looks like a roof to me, which I agree with. I'd have to talk to a designer, the architect, to find out why they did that. But so I would agree with that assessment, which they go over a little bit later. And then here, the main thing is that they just said they found issues with the presented what we call conditional use permit. And for those who are new to this, basically every church has to apply for a conditional use permit so that way they can build within a residential zone. And it's basically permission from the town to, I guess, ignore some of the residential um, parameters or restrictions that they have for houses in the area. But yeah, the main thing is that they just found issues, um, and that they're concerned about, like, we don't want any special favors for, you know, these particular people. If you grant this, you are now setting a new precedent, and for past religious institutions, present institutions, and future institutions. And there's a chance of, opens up the idea of litigation or suing. Like, hey, you granted them that, but you told us no. There is that concern, right? So that's what that's about. And I'll just keep moving along here. This here is a picture of the I guess the LDS Church applying for their conditional use permit. So that we'll just keep going on that. This is what people keep talking about, the Texas state law as well as the federal law about protecting, like, religious institutions and individuals from city or state regulations and laws that will interfere with their what you might say, like, religious exercise, personal exercise. So just a couple things, right? So this was passed in 1999 to not show bias for zoning process by any municipal, for a city town or city or a town, or I can't say that word right now. Struggling.
Municipality.
Thank you. I was struggling with that one. Substantially burdening a person's free exercise of religion, unless, which that excess substantial burden is the key word that people keep talking about, because that's pretty vague. Unless the agency can prove that the burden is in furtherance of a compelling government interest. So you can't, um, uh, if you have a law in place that limits somebody's freedom of religion, they have to be given that freedom of religion unless there is a, like, specific reason that's extremely important. I don't know what would be a reason that they would say the government would overrule a person's personal religious freedom, but I don't know. Can you think of one? I know you've spent some time studying this, right?
Yeah, when I read the document, basically compelling interest says that it has to be something like public safety related.
Yeah, yeah, okay, safety. Yeah, that's a good one. So,
But the thing is
like,
that the church has to show that they're placing a substantial burden on them as well. And so the church's argument is that, hey, we've won cases in the past when it comes to architecture with the Boston Temple. And so you might not want to mess with us when it comes to steeple heights because we've won cases with when it comes to architecture. Now, they didn't win. When they won, it wasn't specifically with steeple height. And so they're kind of pushing their luck a little bit with this because the Boston Temple was with the steeple altogether. Like it was just the steeple. It wasn't with steeple height. But yeah, that's their argument. I don't know if they'll win, but that's their argument.
right, right. And then basically there's a similar law just federally, and that's what this would have been under. So Texas has its own law, and then after that law was passed, there was another federal law. I read through a bunch of documentation about it, but honestly, I don't remember it. And right now, like, I think, it's obviously relevant, but I don't necessarily. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not necessarily going to argue from completely that angle. But just the idea of, we have religious assemblies, especially smaller, unfamiliar ones that may illegally discriminate against the face of zoning codes. So, like, if they put in a law that basically would prevent someone from putting up a giant cross, that could potentially be, to me, a cross is a symbol to Christians that, of their savior, right? And if there was something out there that basically says, you can't put out anything that is related to, death or something, right? You can't have
Yeah.
symbols of death. That's just an example, right? The cross could be considered a symbol of death because that was how he was killed, right? Um, and so, like, this is important for everybody for that has any kind of religious conviction. But yeah, it can be Right here, they point out the Supreme Court has varied in its definition of substantial burden over the years, but more recently it stated a substantial religious burden was present when the government put substantial pressure on an adherent to modify his behavior and to violate his beliefs. And I think that's the one that happened about it was a prisoner. Um, was he Muslim? I don't remember. Don't quote
Probably
me on that.
because there haven't been any land use cases that have actually made it to the Supreme Court. So
Yeah,
the only RLUIPA cases that have actually made it to the Supreme Court have been inmates' rights cases. So yeah, it's going to be a prisoner case.
got it. Yep. So glad to have you here because yeah, there's just so much material. I just didn't have everything to write it out. But this page, page 6, I don't have too much to say on this one, other than it just kind of goes into more into this language. So, in addition, RLUIPA prohibits zoning and landmarking laws that treat churches or religious assemblies on less than equal terms with non-religious assemblies or institutions. Um, can any religious institution bring a claim? It says yes, but the burden is on the plaintiff to show the government is substantially burdening their free exercise of religion. So that part has varied as they were explaining. So then here's the next part. So based on these things, I just wrote some notes. So if we say no temple, then that would be a substantial burden. Um, we have allowed many churches to be built in residential, including LDS. So um, I think the main thing here is, prior approval of multiple religious facility. Gosh, I should have reviewed this part a little bit more, but therefore the LDS temple has a right to be built. So basically saying, yes, you can build a temple. Like, okay, let me say this again. If we said, as in Fairview, said no temples, then that would be a substantial burden because we have allowed many churches to be built in residential, including an LDS chapel. Um, and here they're basically just arguing, we just say no to the roof height and the steeple height and the lighting plans. So that in this one, those are their three main concerns: steeple height, roof height, and lighting plan. And you can't claim those are a substantial burden due to other temples that are smaller and a few don't have steeples. So if the town grants more favorable zoning precedent, that could open a can of worms with other churches. So
Wait, they tried to make the point that a few of our temples don't have steeples. They
yeah, so in there they talk about this.
Oh, okay. So they tried to make the same point that Nemo made.
Right.
Okay, so they're not just arguing about steeple height; they're trying to argue like steeples in general.
Yeah, I think their main thing is like, hey, you don't even have to have a steeple to be a church, to be a temple because you have ones without it. So like,
See, that's where I start having a problem because Nemo tried to make the same argument and he made 3 points. He said like churches don't need a steeple. Churches don't the steeple doesn't need to be a certain height and architecture is secondary to ordinances. And I had a big problem with points 1 and 3. I think he has somewhat of an argument with point 2, and I think
yeah,
Fairview does too, with point 2 as well. But the thing is that the church has been able to win cases in the past with the Massachusetts Supreme Court when it comes to points 1 and 3, and
yeah,
that's the argument they're coming forward with Fairview. So I think they're very, very wrong on that point when it comes to the steeple in general.
yeah,
Like,
and I don't know if you looked at the one that I sent you, but there was also the case in New York where they wanted to build a pretty big temple with a town.
right.
And it was a small town and they had a really small height limit. It was like 23 feet. I'd have to go back and review, but it was pretty small. And the church worked with the town and they removed so many things to try and get this temple built. Um, and it just got to the point where they basically made it a quarter the size. They bought this huge lot because back then the temples that they built were much more extravagant. And this was close to where the church started, right, in New York. Um, so I think they wanted to make something that's a little bit more similar to the DC temple or the Oakland temple or like the LA temple or the Salt Lake City temple, where you have a big lot of property. and a big structure and visitor center. And I think they wanted to try and host the temple pageants that they used to do in New York there. Um, you know what I'm talking about? The one on the
Yeah.
Hill Cumorah pageant.
Yeah.
I think that's where they wanted to try and do it. Basically, they ended up suing because the town was just causing so many issues. And as soon as the town started to see that they were going to lose the case, they started negotiating again. And even then, the church still made uh, changes to try and work with the town more. But they were going to lose that case. So that's just another example. And one of those things was the steeple that was really important. So, and
Yeah.
that's actually argued in the letter that the church uh, lawyer put out, not the church lawyer, but the lawyer representing the church. He's a Texan. He's not a
Yeah.
member of our church, but
Abernathy.
yeah, Abernathy. He put out
Yeah.
in his letter. He references that one as well.
Yeah. See, the thing is, like, I get if they just stick with steeple height, like I think they might have a case with that if they just take that to court because the church hasn't been able to win when it comes to just the height.
Yeah,
But when it comes to if they're arguing that you don't need a steeple, I mean, the church was able to convince the Massachusetts Supreme Court that that the Boston Temple needed a steeple, and I'm pretty sure that the Massachusetts Supreme Court knew about those five temples that didn't have steeples, and yet those didn't seem to be relevant. The thing is that the the lower courts in Massachusetts they deemed that it wasn't necessary. A steeple wasn't necessary, and the Massachusetts Supreme Court overruled that and said it's not your job to determine what architectural features are necessary to their religious worship because they've shown that they sincerely care about their architecture, their lights, and their steeples when it comes to the temple. Though the church like readily concedes that it is secondary to like the ordinances that happen inside, and that's why I think that Nemo's third point is a straw man. Like, of course, the church isn't going to say that they're just as important, but they are arguing that they are important enough to fall under religious freedom protections at the state and federal level. And if you look at the state law, the Texas state law that Abernathy quotes, it uses a lot of the same language and phrasing that the Massachusetts Supreme Court uses as well. That it's not the job of the government to decide what architectural features are necessary to a church's religious worship. So does that apply to steeple height? I don't know, but I think that like the town of the Fairview United is wrong to bring up the fact that the church, oh, you have temples that don't have steeples. They're using the same argument that Nemo's making, and that's where I start having a problem.
sure. And they're fine with us building a steeple. So like as far as that point, we'll give that to them. But if you read Abernathy's letter, I think he's also stating this case in New York. I believe it's Harmony, New York. I wish I had taken better notes, but I did the best I could. Go read that letter if you want. It's on the McKinney, Texas Temple website. But in there, they actually were winning based off of height as well, because I think because their height was, the height of the steeple was higher than the precedent, and so they were able to kind of use that as well in there.
Well,
I don't.
they were winning off of height. Okay,
Yeah, they were.
so
So I don't think it made it to the Supreme Court of the state because based on some of the thing I was reading, it's like as soon as they were starting to go down that litigation territory, the town started to become much more workable.
yeah,
Because I mean, they had been working with the town, but it just became ridiculous the amount of concessions that they had to make. That I mean, basically, it took so long that they ended up building a temple in New York City, and after that, all they just scrapped the plans because it just took so long for them to be able to get through all the issues they were having with that town. So
right,
this is where um I think we'll kind of go over this more later, but I'll just review what this slide's going to say. But they are trying to establish that like the current precedent of the town for a tower feature is 68 feet. And they basically say that the Creekwood United Methodist Church's bell tower was rejected. They show more documents later, so I'm just going to scroll past this one. But yeah, so right here, that 154 tower on 9.5, it was not approved. So that's what they're saying. So the actual precedent is the 68 feet for the stake center in Fairview. And then this one, so this is basically showing the ordinance. No, no, wait, wrong page. No, page 9. I must have messed up on my page number. Oh, here. So they're basically we reference like water towers and radio towers as well, and they're basically just saying like that um, those don't apply since they're under a different set of rules. It's not a religious structure, which I get as a general, like maybe by the law, but I think when we talk about like appearance of a town, like just the idea of like, were people upset when, the giant water towers built? I mean, because those things are massive.
Yeah.
I'll show in some of my documentations just how big these things are. Like, I mean, was there a big concerns like, hey, we can have a water tower, we need a water tower, but maybe not, just not right there, or those kind of things because of these shadows. They're concerned about shadows and water towers. I mean, they're like 80 feet in diameter, and so if you're worried about the appearance of the town and you're worried about like some of the shadow casting that's going to go around, like water towers are going to do that way more than a steeple.
Yeah.
So
If your only concern is about it covering your sunsets, then I don't know, just seems a bit inconsistent to me.
yeah, I mean, I get it. Um, they, but I'm also like, just like think logically, like if we're trying to say that this is going to be an eyesore, which is basically what they're saying. I mean, the mayor call it like an alien civilization. That's what the temple would look like in their town.
Yeah.
And we'll show why he might have said that later on. So we'll keep going, we'll keep moving. But here's a picture of the bell tower that the United Methodist Church wanted to build. And this is that ordinance. And they're going to do here. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. Um, and they'll show here on, let's see, page 10, they'll show that the roof was the only part that was approved. Is it here? Yeah. Oh, basically just saying the tall tower was rejected, but the roof height was approved, this 38-foot roof. And then they come here and they say the town of Fairview did not approve the tower feature of height of 154. So this is that same ordinance. So this ordinance cannot be fairly used as a precedent to justify any tower. And they reference this because it was approved with conditions. And it says right here, the location and footprint of the bell tower is approved with the height, noise, and sound system to be addressed at a later time. And so they say that height wasn't approved because it says we're going to address it at a later time with planning and zoning commissions. All right. And then I think I want to show one more slide before I'll just go over kind of their argument, and then I'll show them my side of it with this. So here on page 12, basically say the United Methodist Church actually referenced this water tower in their application, right? So basically you're saying, look, there's a tall tower, so we should be able to build a tall tower too. And basically because it wasn't approved based off of the president, they're saying you can't use water towers to set a precedent for your religious structures. That's their argument, because they say it was denied that this argument doesn't work. And as I showed you, this is closer to, I guess, in the town and farther away from the commercial district. And that's where that water tower is. If I pull this back up, it's around here. Is that water tower? Let's see. Oh, hold on. How do I get this to go back down? There we go. Nope. This one. All right. So that's kind of where they're going that way. And then let's just go one more slide, and then it should be most of their argument. So the United Methodist CUP was not signed like it should have been. That's kind of what they're saying here. But they also acknowledge that it doesn't necessarily matter, because if it's, so right here, The town of Fairview has a provision that automatically cures mistakes in any document, typically every 3 years, so missing signatures are not necessarily an issue. So this is what it should be with the stamp and the signature. This is the CUP from the Methodist Church. It's not signed here and there's not that stamp. And that's kind of what they're pointing out. But since it's been over 3 years, it's not necessarily an issue. All right. And then they go on to establish what is the tallest site. So this is where I'm going to flip over to some of the documents that I have. So first one I'm going to pull up is the first meeting that they have. These are the meeting notes I wanted to bring up. And so this section here is where they talk about the conditional use permit for Creekwood Methodist Church. And I've highlighted the parts that talk about the bell tower, since that seems to be the main issue. So right here, it says the CUP generally meets the town's requirements. There are several conditions, which we saw, right? There are some conditions that need to be met in conjunction with approval of the CUP. And it showed that the height, the sound, what was it? The height and the sound of the bell tower. And then there was one other, but those are the two most important because we're mostly talking about the bell tower.
Right.
They also said the staff does not believe that there will be a negative impact of the bell's tower's shadow. Then you come down here. So the height of the bell tower is 154 feet. The FAA may require conducting a height impact study relative to this height. And if this height is approved by the FAA, then the staff also recommends approval. So they state in here what their issue with the height is. And it's just, we want to make sure that it's okay with the nearby airport. So it doesn't have to deal with the look of the town, whether it's going to look bad to the town. It is everything to do with their concerns about the FAA and what they're going to do. So this is the first meeting that they have. And then in the next meeting, so this is August 28th of 2006. And mind you, the town is about half the size as it is now in 2006. And this is before they've invested. In 2017, they invested like 50 million into that shopping district. So it's half the size. So it's much smaller. It's much closer to that small farm town feel that they want to try and maintain. But they haven't spent all this money expanding their commercial district yet. And so that comes a little bit later. So if we go to the next, so here are the next meeting notes. This is on the 5th. So there was a discussion on the bells, but the tower height did not seem to be a problem. And then down here, that says basically some other things. You can read this if you want. If anybody wants the documents, I could figure out a way to make them available to review. But to approve the conditional use permit for Creekwood United Methodist Church as submitted, including the 150 feet. So they'll point out this 150 feet, which to me, that's just the person making the notes not correctly citing 154. So they're not lowering the height. I mean, this is just meeting notes. This is just somebody recording what happened in the meeting, right? For the bell tower and the 38 height of the building. So they approved the height here. That's what they're saying. And then, so it goes back to planning and zoning for the bells. So they went to planning and zoning already for the height, but they have to go back again for the bells. All right. So this argument that still needed to go back to planning and zoning, and that's where it fell apart. The planning and zoning approved the height because it states right there that the height of both the building and the Methodist Church was approved. So then there's still another meeting, and this is where I think it becomes even clearer. So right here, so status of the conditional use permit of the Creekwood Methodist Church on this lot. And so it's 154 height of the bell tower is approved, right? Clear as day, as well as the height of the building. All other conditions of the approval as stated. Exhibit C are approved. So that Exhibit C, if I can go back, it says right here, all other conditions approved, approval as stated in Exhibit C. If I go back to this is your Exhibit C. that they're saying. This is where it says, hey, we need to go back and evaluate the height still, the noise, and the sound system, right?
And that's from the Fairview United document that they're claiming they're using to say that the bell tower was never approved, right?
Right, right. So in this meeting notes, they're saying all the conditions of Exhibit C that I just showed you are approved. Adopting ordinances are approved, and the town staff shall let the Planning and Zoning Commission that the town council does not have a problem with the sound system of the bell tower. And then in here, it also says some other issues about the airport height hazard, which is where their concerns for the height was. It wasn't appearance. It was just concerns with the FAA or the FAA. Right here. So proposed bell tower and height chimes. And a letter of understanding between the Creekwood United Methodist Church and Lovejoy signed by both parties. So basically, these are the documents that they used to verify everything was taken care of. Hey, we met with this person, we met with this person, and we have these documents to show that everything that we have planned is okay with the planning and zoning.
And to be clear, the Mormonish kind of reviewed these same documents, and they tried to make it seem like that the height was disapproved because the height was because of the whole thing with the FAA. But like, even if it was, the consideration with the height isn't the same. It's not for the same reason as it is for this for the temple. It's more like, it's kind of like for the temple, it's going to be in our way. It's going to block our sunsets. It's going to keep us from seeing dark skies.
Yeah.
But in the case of the Methodist Church, it was because we wanted to get approved from the FAA, which is a much more pressing matter.
Yeah, it was more of a safety issue. I will say, as far as appearance, this is a much bigger lot. They're on 30 acres versus our church building or temple is only on 8 acres. So you're going to have maybe some of the houses a little bit closer. But as you can see, if from like where this is going to be, most of the surrounding stuff is just other church buildings and like businesses. And so you don't have another house and still here. And then these ones, they're not going to really get hit by the shadow of the steeple because it's on the other end. It's closer this way. And so it's mostly going to hit this road, and it's going to hit, I don't know, maybe these Allen residents. So they're in a different city. So I don't even know if they can really have a say. I don't know how that goes because, they're sharing this road, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm kind of like, huh? It's also a lot closer to this district because there's a few houses here, and then it's basically just businesses. So you have businesses, few houses, and then churches, and then houses again and businesses. So you kind of have a decent buffer with the houses. The main concern I would say is, these people in the back. And then this group, and we'll show some images and why I think that there should be less concern. So I think this is where I was document. So so yeah, this is basically showing that they had provided information from the FAA approving the bell tower height, and the lighting of the bell tower would be at the discretion of the church as long as the FAA regulations are followed. So they don't even care how they light the building, which is surprising because they care so much now, but they didn't care. They just say, hey, as long as it's not a problem for the airport. So, and that's something that they're really stressed about. I think that's been resolved since this letter was originally wrote, because there's a lot of plans that were made, and I'll kind of review that later. So, any questions about these documents? Oh, I have one more to show. So in case there's any question, Creekwood thought it was approved.
Oh.
Because right here they state in their CUP. So in 2017, they never ended up building it, right? And so you can say, well, they never built it, so it doesn't set a precedent. So I get that argument, but it was approved. So this argument that wasn't approved, well, they state right here in 2006, Creekwood UMC received a CUP for a building expansion that included the installation of 154 tall digital bell tower. And then they say this is no longer in the plans. And it doesn't say why. So they decided to go with a steeple. It doesn't say why they didn't build a bell tower. It doesn't, none of the records indicate that there is an issue from the town on the bell tower. Everything is just, it seems to indicate that, my guess is just they got it quoted out and it was going to be too expensive and they decided to opt out of it. Is just an assumption. I could be completely wrong, but there's currently no documents from 18 years ago to explain why they decided not to build it, because everything points to them having approved it, and because they met the conditions that were stated in the ordinance. And that was one thing that say, well, the ordinance is more relevant than the meeting notes, and I agree, but those don't conflict. There's no conflict between the meeting notes and the CUP. It just paints the whole story of what went down. So yeah, that was the last document I had to show.
Yeah, so Mormonish, they are trying to make it sound like it was never approved, but it sounds like it was approved, but just never built.
Yeah,
And so I don't know what the legal implications of that, but
me neither.
the point I want to make is that critics try to say that, well, like, even if the church can legally do what they're doing, they may not, like, they shouldn't do it because it's not the right thing to do or the moral thing to do. It's not the nice thing to do. Well, I would turn that around and say, well, if the town approved this Methodist bell tower, then it's not nice that they're being inconsistent and not approving the LDS temple. Like, even if, like, there's no legal implications behind it, like they're not obligated legally to approve it, that if we can dig up all these notes and show that they did in fact approve it, and that the only, like, problems with the height were that they had to check with the FAA, which is not, there's a no equivalency with that, and the problems with the height with the temple, then it's definitely not nice and it's not moral that they're with what they're doing to us when it comes to the temple. So just turn that right back around on them when it comes to what they're doing to us.
Yeah, sure. And I like I'm sympathetic to the town and why they would want to preserve it. Like there's a couple things I also want to note about this whole situation. 2006, the town was about half the size. Basically, most of the area was half the size. McKinney was about half the size. And Allen, I checked Allen. I don't remember what Allen was, but McKinney and Fairview were both approximately half the size of this. And before this, I couldn't figure out like what they had as far as a big shopping business. But in from what I can tell, like Dillard's came in 2010. So this is a town that's being built up. And they're adding these big box stores, the Dillards. I don't know. I think Macy's was added around a similar time. And then just as recently as 2017, they invested 50 million into this whole shopping complex to basically expand it. So like this wasn't a small town. Like I read quotes from newspapers like this isn't a small town anymore. This isn't a farm town anymore. From the newspapers talking about the events surrounding this. So in many ways, like you're like trying to play both sides of being, hey, we want to be, a part of the businesses that we have because you're in the city, right? The suburbs of Dallas Fort Worth. While also being, hey, we still want to have this identity of a small farm town. And I get that because you want to have this private, secluded feeling, and then still have access to all the amenities that a city has to offer. And so that's why it's such a desirable place to live, and to that. And so maybe the townspeople are a lot more concerned now about that because before it was just exciting to like have people want to come here, and now they're starting to feel crowded, which a lot of Texans are complaining about. I see things all the time like don't move to Texas, move to Oklahoma. And so there's been a change in the I guess that willingness to like let people in and allow some of these things. And so I want to give the town like that recognition of like, hey, I understand why you wouldn't want this, and maybe you were okay with it before, because a lot changed in 18 years. But then it's like you're spending 15 million on this just how many years ago? 2017. Like you're playing kind of both sides here a little bit, because it's just a mile down from there, right? This isn't like a complete opposite end of the district. It's just 2 minutes down the road.
Right. Yeah. You you want to make your cake and eat it too, or have your cake and eat it too,
Right,
basically.
right. So I'm gonna go back to this. So that's page 11. Now, then we kind of talked about page 12 with the water tower precedent. And then down here, so yeah, I think we've already reviewed all these documents. Page 14. Yeah, this is basically, they wanted to show that because they wanted to reject the bell tower and say, no, the precedent is actually the LDS Stake Center right here, right? So this is because the big thing that they're trying to push is we don't want just our buildings to keep getting taller and taller. And so let's look at what we currently have. And the tallest steeple in this town is the Stake Center at 68 feet. And so then they show the documents with the plans to show that it's 68 feet here. And then they also set the roof precedent, which they kind of go a little bit semantics here, because right here, there's this 42 feet. Let me look what the notes I had from reading this page. So they want to just establish that the roof precedent is actually 39 feet, 10 inches, since the approved AC box was never built. So the idea is like if something was approved but never built, then that doesn't count as setting a precedent. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't just say that. And maybe it's just kind of arbitrary as far as what the town can decide on that. So that's what they're showing here. And I think maybe they go over it more later if I remember right. So 17. This is a good argument. This one I say, hey, yeah, you're right. Basically, when the church put in their plans, they tried to say that the roof is actually like this 56 inches. But if you look here, there's this bottom of steeple level that kind of extends the back at 65 feet. So they say, hey, the roof height is actually 65 feet instead of what they're claiming as 56 feet. Um, I don't understand that as far as an architecture. It's probably just people trying to be creative. I would say for that. So I'll say that, yeah, that does feel like a more of a 65-foot roof rather than this 56 roof that they're saying. But they showed it in the plans. So I mean, if you reviewed the plans, you could see that that's the difference. So yeah, that's all I have to say here. Without anything else, I just say, yeah, that sounds fair to me.
Okay.
And then they're just trying to show here that the steeples are just empty, right? It's just and like a steeple base. There's nothing that's really like, oh, I see. Like you can't argue that an elongated thing is a steeple base because you look at these other steeples and it's just the square part. So they're saying you can't say this is a whole steeple base. It's just the square would be considered the steeple base underneath the steeple. So yeah, I'm fine with that. And I think just more of that. Let's see, what page am I on? 19. Any comments? Yep, same thing. Here is where they try and show that like this AC roof that was just a little bit part of this building. It's only like 10%. Doesn't really set a precedent for a roof height. And it ended up never really being built. On page 20. Yeah. So I think that's fair. I mean, I guess why didn't they have a concern with 42? I think maybe because it was smaller. I don't know. I just think, honestly, I think the church, based on the way this whole thing started, I think if they were a little bit closer in expectation, um, I think they would have given the temple, it would have been easier to negotiate. But I think just the fact that the church saw that they were willing to approve that tall bell tower. I think they went into it with the design and architecture like, hey, we can come in just like 15 feet, 10, 15 feet above that 165 precedent. And then if they have issues with that, then we can negotiate and bring it lower. But to the town, that's like, no, that's not a precedent. Uh, and so I think that kind of caused some real butting heads rather than it becoming a more of a negotiation because of just how far away those are. I mean, it's 100 feet difference between what they're saying that we have to be now versus if those expectations had been a little closer, I don't think there would be this nitpicking.
Well, I think that and the church sincerely believes that the bell tower was approved, and I think they're
Yeah.
right.
And I think it's
But
right too.
the townspeople and Mormonish and a lot of ex-Mormons are they think that the church is lying about that, and they're painting it as the church being nefarious about that. And so here we are, the church is being painted as this nefarious organization that's trying to get their way and bully this town. And so
Yeah. I think, it's not like I've been involved in a lot of these things, but I've heard so many stories about times that the town has worked or that the church has worked with the town to come up with something that both can agree with. Even in times when um the city council would have approved it, but there was a large enough group of concerned local residents that they wanted to make sure that they felt good in the neighborhood, and so they made some concessions. Like my aunt who lives near Newport Beach, they lowered the steeple some for them, and they changed the lighting for them, and they even changed the color of the building for the town. And to me, that's the most common story. I mean, we have how many in uh, around the world now? Over 100 and over 200, right? Or are we at like 170? I can't remember. Currently built. We have a lot more announced and in construction, but
it's like 190, 195 under construction. But yeah, the if you realize that the church sincerely believes that the Methodist bell tower is the precedent, then it doesn't seem like such so unreasonable for them to think that the size of this temple is what they can build, and then they can maybe compromise with the town on that. But
right.
but
Yeah, exactly.
if the precedent truly is the stake center, then it looks like the church is truly trying to bully this town into doing something that is completely unreasonable, and that's what the ex-Mormons and critics are trying to run with right now. And
Right, right, exactly right. On that, I mean, just yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation. On that, and I just want like if you're from Fairview, and you don't really want this building. The main thing is I just want you to understand like why some of the members might feel a little bit persecuted. I mean, a church, I don't necessarily think persecute is the right word, but I mean, a lot of us have experience with being at least ostracized. I know my family has a personal experience where we were going to join a group down to Mexico to build a house with a Christian group. And everything was fine until that Christian group found out that we were members of the LDS church. And then they uninvited us, and the individual who had invited us to join felt kind of silly about it, and felt really sorry about that. And then another experience, and that was many years ago, but even just recently in Minnesota, we had a friend who wanted to work with a pro-life group in our small town. And in a small town, you take what you can get. And she was working with this group, but then once they found out that she was a member of our church, the group, I guess the committee, uh, rejected her, even though she had all this experience. She was excited to work with them, but because of her faith, she was rejected from working with this pro-life group. And so like these happen. I mean, I know Jim Bennett was talking about, like this persecution complex that we have. Well, you got to remember, like you're in Utah. I'm not saying like we're persecuted, but like we can still be ostracized. I know my sister's had experience where she homeschools and not she can't just go to any homeschool group. Certain Christian homeschool groups won't include her in that group.
yeah,
So
Jim Bennett, try to live in the Bible Belt for a little while, or yeah, That
Yeah. I mean, you're in
yep.
Utah, and so that totally makes sense. You're the majority, but when you're not the majority, you're the minority. Things go a little different. Just look at comments online, and even some of the things that were posted on here on Reddit, just some of the negative comments posted about being polygamous and all that stuff that was posted on it, and some of this hype, I am speculating, stemmed off of Ex-Mormon subreddit, because when I followed one of the articles that talked about like the I guess my that stake president letter that talking about like, hey, we need to let people know like steeple height is important. That was originally posted on Ex-Mormon subreddit and then reshared on McKinney and Allen's and Fairview's Reddit channels. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into that. Just so that we can have a little bit of like view from us. Like we've had experiences with that. So, anyways, this is anything else you have on that?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. So here, this is basically just saying that the original plan for the lighting on this temple was rejected because of their dark sky policy, and they reference this 3.14. And from what I can tell, it was most likely rejected out of maybe not total understanding. Since then, if you go to the website, there's a whole PDF you can review. I'll open it right here, that basically shows how they have these lightings that actually do meet those ordinances. I'm This isn't my field of specialty where they're talking about these different foot candle lumens, maximums, and here you'll see here just like these are the things like they're implementing some really advanced lighting control systems, so that way if there are issues they can adjust it, they can dim it down, right? So and they're going to follow making sure the lights are off at the proper times, and that is usual. Like that's what happened in Newport Beach, is they had to adjust the setting times for that town in order to meet those things. So that's something that like we can negotiate on, and that's okay, or at least get clarity on. So that's what this whole article talks about. I mean, this isn't a church-owned business that's wrote this engineering plan. This is Oldner Lighting. They're a Texas-based company, and which they talk about how, hey, basically how we're going to be within that range of 1 foot candle to 5 foot candles on those vertical surfaces, which meets the Fairview's town lighting ordinance of a maximum of 5 foot candles on vertical surfaces. In here, they talk about how they're all going to be fully shielded, which if you go back to the Fairview, let me close out some of these since we're done talking about them. If you go back to this is what they have bolded here, this full cut off luminaires from the light source. So they're really concerned about those dark skies. And it seems like the church wants to honor that. And so they had this engineering group put together a document showing, hey, we're gonna focus on that. And here's a little bit more understanding of what the technology is. So you can go to the website if you want to learn more about that. If you're at Fairview and you question some of this stuff, I mean, go ahead and read it. But in here, right here, it shows that everything will be turned off by 11 p.m. And part of the lighting they have to actually do because of like migration patterns, so that way it doesn't hit. So like geese that are flying by don't accidentally hit it, and so that lighting is important at certain times. Then obviously at night they just want it full off. Any questions on that one?
No.
I think that's been resolved based on the letter from Abernathy, but this was an original concern. And so just so, hey, the church was listening to some of your concerns and we're doing their best to address some of them. Unfortunately, I think that tensions just got high between the people representing the church there and the local council. And I think it's just because there was such a vast difference on what they think was going to be all right with this town. So yeah, and here's they're just showing like, hey, look how well lit this is. And my comment to that, it's like, well, if there was concerns with the town, they could probably ask them to adjust them and they would change it. But they maybe have different regulations for that, because it's Dallas. It's not It's not on the suburbs. So different rules and regulations. Uh, and just so you know, I do know this is an important subject to the mayor. I've watched a video of him talking about dark sky policies, and it's something, and this is before the temple even was built, just because I was curious on who he was. And so I just want to say, hey, I understand this is something that you guys pride yourselves on. Um, and I'm hoping that this addresses your concerns with the dark skies. So let's go back to, no, let's just close that. No, gosh, let's see, which one was it?
You trying to look for the visual study?
Oh, there it is. There we are. Oh, we'll get to the visual studies soon. It's here in a couple. 23. So this is where we go into the visual study here. So 23. Oh, I guess that my notes are a little off. So there it talks about the line of sight proposal here. And as you can see, what they kind of did here is they said, hey, this is what from this house, this is that Fair Oaks Road, what it looks like. And we, the residents of Fairview, they're really concerned about the light pollution here. And they're like, hey, this is what it's going to look like if you build the temple in front of this person's house. Which, if you go back to Google Maps, and let me do this, so you can kind of see what this looks like. You can see there's a pretty good tree line along these houses, and then there's some trees here, but much less of a tree line here. And I think this is where it's taken from right here, that image, one of these two lots. And so um, they're basically saying, hey, if the church was built here where there's less of a tree line, then it would be very obvious. They kind of just took paint to it and photoshopped it in front of that tree. So we'll show you what the church professional renderings will look like here in a second, but just want to at least review some of their concerns here. But I think main thing here is just they're still concerned about the dark sky, and they want to make sure that we demand that there's no light pollution. And I believe they addressed that in that document that we showed.
Yeah. So to clarify, the Fairview United, they just use like Microsoft Paint here,
But that's what it looks like to show this.
and later on we'll show like the church's visual study, and I think they actually did a much more sophisticated study to show what
Yeah, I
the
mean, it's definitely on a
temple.
professional level. This is just a concerned resident trying to do his best to represent it, but it's not going to be as accurate, just because for that reason. So then here, if I go to this slide, I think my numbering on my notes are off. But oh no, we're good. Okay, so yeah, they just were concerned about the lighting. Then here, they just talk about traffic studies, and um, there has been a traffic study done, but their main thing here is just saying that if it was a smaller temple, then there would be less traffic, which agreed. Um, I think that if we built a smaller temple, then we would have to build a second temple. And to me, that would be a substantial burden of proof, because the temple that we're trying to build has 4 endowment rooms. Well, let me go to that part on here. I have this.
Well, and traffic problems are not a compelling interest either. That's not a public safety issue. That's just an inconvenience.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there is a level where it could be a concern, but they meet it's below. It's not going to be an issue. And that's what they're saying with the studies. Like, hey, we're not going to like make this to a degree that it should be a concern. So it addresses that. I mean, something's going to be built there and people are going to go to it either way. But yeah, so the temple, it's going to have 4 instruction rooms, 3 sealing rooms, and 1 baptistry. And someone had mentioned like, well, they should just build this other temple called the Yorba Linda Temple in California that was recently approved. Well, just to show you like how often the church is willing to negotiate, they actually shrunk this down from 99 feet tall, this tower, to 70 feet tall. So like they'll work with towns. This is just, I think, an issue where there's such a big discrepancy here that it's just been non-negotiable. It's just been a stalemate, but it's not big enough. It's two instruction rooms short and a ceiling room short. So it's going to be significantly smaller, and to be able to meet the demands for this area. And I also project the future demands of this area because this is just exploding. They're going to have to build a second temple. And that to me would classify as a substantial burden. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's kind of my thoughts.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, if you force the temple to be shorter, you have to make it smaller. Then that means there's less rooms, and
Yeah.
therefore it affects the ordinances. And
Yeah.
even by Mormonish standards, that's a substantial burden.
Yeah. So the proposed temple would be a 2-story, and this temple here is a 1-story, which is why it has half as many instruction rooms and one less ceiling room. So yeah, but yeah, they're just trying to say, hey, if it was a smaller temple, then there'd be less traffic. And yeah, I agree. There would be less traffic with a smaller temple. Well, actually, not necessarily. I guess at full capacity, yes. But yeah, I mean, people are going to be going to it, and less people will be able to go to it as often. Like currently, the Dallas Temple's so busy. I wanted to schedule a group with my youth, just like my deacons quorum, just us, and they basically said we don't do that. You can only schedule it as a whole ward. And so we couldn't have like a smaller intimate group go together and have this special experience with just our young men because of the current climate that the Dallas Fort Worth area has. All right. So then here they talk about property values and basically say, hey, like this, let me read my notes on it, but basically showing that, what page am I on? 25. All right. The question if the temple would add property value, and they say that the FAIR study is biased, which is true. And they say other studies show that it's not necessarily the case. They don't quote the sources, so I'd like to see the sources. Interestingly enough, I found a guy in my ward. I didn't even know it was my ward. I saw him online and saw some of the stuff he was posting, and I reached out to him, and he sent me a study that he did. So a local member in McKinney, where he shows that the Dallas area had actually improved. So he took all these data points. He's willing to share it with anybody, but he then does these averages based on how far away it is from the temple. And he says, as you get closer to the Dallas temple, the price per square foot actually goes up. This isn't necessarily like a critical thing, but just letting you know, like, hey, if you're concerned, like, hey, I just bought this expensive house, I'm concerned it's going to go down in value. This kind of shows that I don't think you have to be as concerned because it's going to be a beautiful building. So I'm just going to read what he wrote about it. So he says attached is there's 226 homes sold in the last 90 days of when he did this. And as you get closer to the temple, it goes up in per square foot. And then the available home inventory goes down, and the closer you get, the closer you get. So there's less home turnover the closer you get to a temple as well. Both of those facts should help you answer the property value impact question. Anyone who claims the LDS temple would adversely impact the local property is simply not informed with supporting facts. So he's willing to provide this for anybody who wants to check him. We'll have to figure out a way to maybe reach out to way for people to get a hold of these documents. We'll have to talk about that, but I'm sure there may be other reasons people don't want it, but I can tell you that these buildings are wonderful, beautiful, and peaceful. Not only would this building bring joy to those who enter, it will also stand as a beautiful landmark for Fairview, where people may come and walk and enjoy its grounds. And that's something that I also want people to know, is anybody can go on the temple grounds free of charge, and people do that. Like the temple that I went to a lot growing up in Oakland, California, this is just some random people that decided to do their photo shoot. And so I just want to say, like, the grounds belong to the community. It's not necessarily us. You guys can come, and BYU, which, is the big school for the church, has like wins the landscaping national championship every year. I didn't even know that's a thing, but they win it every year. And I think it's because the church cares heavily about maintaining beautiful grounds. And so, yeah, I would go to this church regularly. Basically, every time I went, there was just random people, for quinceañera photos, for prom photos coming and just using it because it's a beautiful site. And like when your sons and daughters are going to prom, they can just come over here and take pictures. You can take your wedding photos on the property. They have no concerns. There is if you're like trying to make a commercial business, like was it like you're going to put something on TV, but just like, hey, I want to do that. I just want to let people of Fairview know, like, you guys have access to the grounds. If we make a wider temple, that's going to bring us closer to the property lines. And I think there's some issues there because you got to have some distance between the temple and like the back of the property and also the front property. Bit of a tangent, but just a
Yeah,
little bit more on that.
I've seen it. It's pretty common for Mexican girls to do their photo shoots for their quinceañeras. I've seen it quite often.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was a time when I was going to that temple when I was really young, once a week almost, and basically always just different people there. And we'd go for fun just to hang out on the grounds because it's beautiful. So,
Yeah.
um,
Don't use it for businesses, otherwise we'll have to go Jesus on you and start flipping tables. But yeah,
yeah, don't use it for businesses, but like,
yeah,
yeah, for your own enjoyment and like good photo shoot spot for, something, a special occasion. It's just fine. All right, 26. This is where they survey the town and they list these as their top concerns. And um, I guess I'm a little bit unconcerned. Not sure why these are concerns because there is a public uh, study. There was a big study done that's 120 pages showing that it can support the growth. Um, Natural beauty, town green spaces. I mean, this is going to be landscaped. It's going to be beautiful. Um, Maintaining the community's appearance. I guess if you don't think it does, then that is trail system. There'll be walking paths. And then managing draining infrastructure. And they have a whole document on that as well, showing how it's going to drain. I'm not a civil engineer, so I can't really answer that. I'm assuming that would answer those questions. And limiting the outdoor lighting. I think they try to address that also in a study as well. So I'll just show the drainage study real quick. There's not a whole lot to show, but I think this also shows the temple grounds really well, which is important. So I guess the idea is if we had to make a shorter, wider temple, we start to remove some of this barrier from being close to other things. We have issues with the parking lot. We remove a lot of this extra landscaping. It would encroach on that. I mean, are these things necessary? No, but I think like we want to create beautiful places, especially when we're trying to think of how we might praise God. I mean, if you have a beautiful chapel, and we don't invest a lot in our chapels, we invest it all in our temples because we want to try and make this as like a special place for that reason.
and they don't have to be necessary.
Right.
According to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, according to Texas state law, it is not the job of municipalities or the judges to determine what is necessary, as long as the church can show that it is important enough. Like if we can look at the history of the church, their actions, their past actions, and they can show that this is important enough that it can be fall under the protections of state and federal law, then you shouldn't bother us about it.
Yeah, right, right. And I think like if you're Catholic and you have a beautiful cathedral, was that beautiful cathedral necessary for you to grow closer to Christ? You would say no, it's not necessary for you to perform the ordinance of the sacraments, right? Or what is it they call it? I'm blanking right now. Communion or communion, but that doesn't mean that it's still not a vital part of your religious experience. Is going to like a beautiful uh, chapel or cathedral and having high ceilings. Like most churches, they all have high ceilings. Um, it's all part of that religious experience that I think can be valuable. I mean, if you go out in nature and you feel closer to God, that just speaks to that idea of like your surroundings can help you connect with God as you kind of see God work through the things around you. So this is the drainage plan. You can go to the website if you have concerns about drainage. And if you're a civil engineer, you can check this out and make sure that it all checks out. So I'll close that. So yeah, I kind of see what they're saying with some of these arguments. I personally don't see how these are issues. I think those issues are addressed and even enhanced, like that town green spaces, right? All right, so we're almost done here. They're just stating there are shorter temples. And yes, there are shorter temples. Those other temples, for the most part, they're all single story, from what I can tell. The one difference is this is a two-story building in order to try and fit as many endowment rooms and ceiling rooms that they want, versus these other ones are smaller because they're meeting a different demographic. They're not. A lot of these aren't necessarily like that close to the city. I mean, we're really close to Plano, which is where I work. I work in Plano. There's headquarters. A lot of big companies' headquarters are in Plano. But yeah, so then they just show there's smaller temples here, and then basically, I think they're trying to say, hey, like you could build this temple here if we make some adjustments potentially. Um, like, hey, this is fine up to here, and then we can work on the steeple potentially.
So
But I think the main thing, but
it's becoming readily apparent that this isn't just about the height of the steeple. like this is how it was originally portrayed that way by some critics, but it's being portrayed by Forever United as the size of the temple in general. And if you limit the size of the temple, you're limiting like the amount of endowment rooms, the amount of ordinance rooms in general, and that is limiting like our religious worship. Those are our ordinances. So I don't know.
yeah. And on that note, like why was Solomon's temple built if the traveling tabernacle was sufficient?
Yeah.
That they performed all the ordinances that they needed in that temple. I think so. Maybe there was a few more, but they were able to get away with it for a long time with just the traveling tabernacle. But then they built something magnificent as a way to like praise God, I would say, in through their building. So, and then here, I think they just wanted to show that the tower feature, there's no activity that occurs in that area, so it's not necessary feature. And yeah, you're right. It's not. It's a symbol. It's not like we go up there and say special prayers or anything. It's just it's a symbol, and symbols can be important and significant. And the phrase that I thought of is like our artistic religious expression. If you've gone to, let's say, Rome, Italy, and viewed some of the beautiful paintings that people have done to honor, different events that occurred in the Bible, like somebody didn't have to put that much effort for like God to recognize it, but they did. Um, and so like we can recognize that as significant and important and like a a way that we can grow closer to God.
Well, and something I want to add is that out in the YouTube comments of the Murph video that I participated in, there were a lot of people that said that we were told all the time that architecture didn't matter, um, and that it was just the ordinances that happened inside. And I responded to a lot of them, and I said when the general authorities said that to you, that was they were referring to a temple that had already been built, already been dedicated, and they what did you expect them to say to you? Like, oh, well, shoot, we weren't able to get all the concessions we wanted out of the local municipality, and so I guess your experience in the endowment is going to be diminished because of that. Like, no, like they're not going to be sore losers. What's done is done. The temple's built. They're not going to say something like that. So they're of course they're going to focus on the ordinances, and of course the architecture is secondary to the ordinances. But when the temple is in the building phase, in the planning phase, they are absolutely going to focus on on the architecture, and they are going to try and get whatever they can out of the local municipality, and they are going to negotiate, and they are going to try very hard, and they have shown that they care very, very much about the temple's architecture, and they will fight for it. And this is not something new, because some critics have tried to argue that, oh well, this whole Fairview Temple, they this is something new, trying to get the members to argue that the height of the steeple is important. Well, it may be new trying to get the members to argue for this, but it's not new that the church tries to negotiate over the height of the steeple. Anytime that they try to build a temple, there's always a very lively and intense negotiation with the local municipality over the height and size of the temple, as we've just discussed. The there's and they have to negotiate with them, and they meet a compromise, and then the temple gets built. This may be the first time that they've tried to get the members to testify to the local town council that the height of the steeple is important, but it's not the first time that the church has actually fought to to get what they want as far as steeple height. And so I just want to get that out there, that if the church does take this to court, they can show that this isn't something that they're just this is something new. They can show that they've consistently care about this, and they sincerely care about this, and it's not just something that they're pulling out of their butts.
Right, right. So, um, yeah, I think that one of the phrases you'll see in the scriptures when it talks about the temple, it's also referred to the mountain of the Lord, right? And so we want to make so that like that's what the temple for the patriarchs was before they had a physical temple built. Was, they go into the mountains. And so in many ways you could look at some of our architecture, and it can remind you of thinking about the mountains and looking up. And so there's a few more things I wanted to show here. I think that I just wanted to show, as far as the mayor said, that this building would look so out of place, it would look like an alien civilization has dropped it onto the property. And I included this visual from the Fairview United website. And, I can understand why you might see this and say that's not going to work in our town. That's gonna destroy our town, right? I mean, that's kind of what they're feeling and saying. And I just wanted to show you that the church took extensive efforts to try and show people, well, what is it actually going to look like? And that's what we'll open up here. And so they took a bunch of images from various locations and used some renderings to show what that would look like. So we can just kind of review these real quick. This is on the McKinney, Texas Temple website. They took images from 11 different locations, what it would look like in that rendering. So you're driving down the road, that's it, right? I don't think anybody would be complaining about that, and saying this is too much. This is too much asked for. You're getting a little closer to it, and then this is what it's going to look like from that CVS. It looks like, so we're getting pretty close to it. And then they start to kind of go back in this back neighborhood, which I would say this is probably the main neighborhood I would be concerned about, as far as your backyard being that temple. This is what it's going to look like from the street right here. So you'll see that steeple and that spire, and I'm pretty sure this was all done with that 173. So like if the town and the church are able to work out and they can get out a height, it doesn't have to be 173. It sounds like they were willing to negotiate to 157. I think if they're at least able to talk to each other, we could probably get a little bit shorter. But if you're going to hold it at 68 feet, that's just too much. You basically have to build a different temple, and that this is just different territory altogether. So here's a different angle. Here you can just see it popping out a little bit. Lots of trees. I mean, you see there's a pretty good tree line for where the majority of the temple is, and the church will also plant trees for that. And we live in Texas. You want to be in the shade. Like it is hot. My brother-in-law has zero trees because this is a brand new house, and it is miserable being in his backyard. And my house is actually pretty nice because I have a house close to me, and so once it gets around 6 o'clock, I get the shade of the neighboring house, and it feels great. So this is what it looked like from the other side of the road. You can see it relative to the stake center. So it's pretty big, but if I don't know why people would find that offensive and like not congruent with the town, but I just want to at least have you see this. And you can hold to your opinion, but I just want you to actually see the effort the church put into showing what the temple would look like. Here's another angle. As you can see, there's going to be lots of trees being planted around to kind of cover it, so you're not just seeing the raw building. But the building's beautiful. It's tall windows and everything. And then this is the neighborhood behind. So you're pulling out of your neighborhood, and this is Allen. That's what you'll see. And then in a lot of cases, there's just trees, you won't even see it. It doesn't take too far before you start to just not see it because the trees are just in the way and the houses will get in the way. So, yeah.
This is a
Any
far
thoughts on that
more
one?
this is a far more sophisticated study than the Microsoft Paint one the that the Fairview United people did. I don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, they spent, a significant amount of time, energy, and money into putting this together. And I'm sure the other one was just put together by a concerned local. So, but yeah, I'm not terribly concerned uh, by it. I don't find that to be offensive and monstrous in this alien civilization that the mayor is calling it, which mayor, I think you're a fine person. Obviously, we have different opinions, but yeah. So there's also the shadow study. If somebody wants to talk to me about the shadow studies and why these are so important, because for one, we live in Texas. I mean, from 7 p.m., basically anything like 5 feet tall is going to cast a pretty big shadow. I mean, the trees are going to give you shade. My one thought was the one place that I don't want to be in the shadows is your pool, because you want your pool to be warm, but all these people that have pools have trees all around their pool anyway, so it's going to be in the shade either way. So that's what they wanted to show here. There wasn't any comment around this other than that. But yeah, and then they wanted to show this rendering about how it kind of casts a shadow in between these properties. What this ignores is the fact that there's a lot of trees that are already going to cast shadows and in the same direction. Um, you're not going to see this uh, as prominent, I don't think, because it just is so small at the top. And I think another thing that's important about this is um, just the idea, like we want people to be able to have that artistic religious expression. And there was a recent issue with this Las Vegas temple where some people are filing a lawsuit or in Lone Mountain, and they had made changes to the height, so like they can negotiate. It was originally 216, and they brought it down to 196. But some of the people were saying, hey, they were denied a 77-foot cross, and then this other was the 85-foot prayer tower. And so I guess that is Fairview's concerns that these lawsuits will come through with this other religious structures that these people are concerned about. But I personally think that we want to be more of a religious society than secular society, and that's what I really liked about Stephen Pinnaker's comments is that, you know, I I think we want to be able to show off our Christianity to people in ways to help point people towards Jesus Christ.
Right. Yeah. Especially if you're an evangelical Christian society like Texas.
Yeah. One more note was this Muslim mosque that was denied by McKinney. And um, Stephen Murphy had talked about this a little bit. This is an article that I read through and about how it was denied and how the Islamic Association pulled the rezoning request and they're going to re-engage with the community. And, I want them to build this temple or this mosque, I guess. And I emailed them letting them know, hey, I'm a McKinney resident and I support you in this. Um, and, there were people that were saying bigoted and nasty comments towards this Muslim community. Um, and I've, they could have grounds to sue. I think one of the things that they're going to do first before they reapply is just try and re-engage the community. But also, I think it's that they want to do a traffic study to make sure that it's not going to affect the community, which there can be certain situations, I guess, where you can deny so that way there's not too much congestion in an area. And I will say I drive by that uh, almost daily where that is going to be. And there's a lot of schools around. And so there could be some increased congestion. But I think if the traffic study doesn't show anything alarming, there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be approved. And I think that we need more religious structures rather than less, and let people do that. And this is the McKinney mayor showing support. Honestly, I think it would have been nice to build it in McKinney, as it seems like there's a lot better relationship between the church and McKinney. I don't know why they chose Fairview. I'm thinking that it might be due to the traffic concerns that you have to have a pretty good flow of people to help out with some of the issues with the size of the temple. But to be honest, I've been going to the temple for years. I've never sat in traffic trying to pull into a temple parking lot. I don't know. Have you?
No, not really.
No. So Fairview, rest assured, there's really not an issue with traffic. It's just the way that the temple works. So I don't think I have anything else to say. Obviously, went a lot longer than I anticipated. Um, but yeah, I think the main thing is I just want to say, hey, let's help people create, artistic religious expression and allow, religion to flourish rather than looking at more ways to prevent it from people being able to express um, those those religious experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate it. I think we went over everything that we planned on going over. Um, I hope I don't know if anyone from Fairview will see this or if a Mormonish or any other critics will see this, but I hope this presents the other side fairly. I'm open to any criticisms or responses. Um, but I hope that we represented our side fairly. We represented the other side fairly, and did take a little bit longer than anticipated, but I think it was necessary. So I appreciate it, Daniel, for you doing the work to go over all this and doing the research.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks again for letting me share it with you. If people want to talk to me, probably reach out to me on X. I'm Flynn Dog DAWG FL. So FLINDAWG on X. That's probably the best way. And if you're a Fairview resident, I'm willing to have a discussion. Not really interested in something heated, just somebody who wants to like talk through some of these concerns because I think just because it's currently not on the table, it seems like the idea of lawsuit, like there hasn't been a lawsuit filed by the church yet. So I'd rather, I think they're evaluating their options. I think it'd be good to maybe just have people re-engage in the conversation and talk through some of these things. So
Excellent.
thank you.
Yeah. Have a good one, guys.